Ben, thank you so much for joining me today. Of course, we are here to talk about Twisters, which is now available to buy or rent digitally, but it's still in theaters and it's still doing really, really well. Tell me, how
Yeah,
excited are you to see the movie still performing so well?
I'm really happy about it. I mean, it was satisfying because, we put a lot into it. And I think it's kind of interesting. I'm kind of hoping that if people do watch it at home, and that might inspire them to head back out to the movie theaters and see it on the big screen as well.
Yeah, I was a huge advocate for trying to get people to go see this in 4DX in particular, because combining the great effects that you guys have on the film with also some of the feel, some of the sounds, some of the wind and all that, it was such a great time.
Oh, it would have been so good. Unfortunately, with another big blockbuster hot on our heels, it made it hard. And I had helped work on the Screen X and the 4DX things, and I was like, and I missed out on seeing them. But I'd read that it was a real fun way to see them. Yeah.
It was really, really good. I think for me it was there was like some details where it wasn't necessarily a hard wind, but maybe there was like just like a soft gust of wind. It would just come over you. And then also not holding back on rain. That was pretty cool. I didn't expect
No,
that.
I've done a couple of immersive experiences, and we could always advocate for the people at home that they set up a little fan and just plug it in and unplug it. And someone has a water pistol or something, just set up your own 40X in your living room.
It's funny that you mentioned that because at CinemaCon with Glen Powell and Anthony Ramos, they put giant fans in their faces and then threw like just threw debris at them and like, yep, this is what it's gonna be like, guys. So
You know what? They were so that obviously made them much more tolerant of what we threw at them as we were filming them. They couldn't have been better. We, pummeled them with rain. We had wind from Scott Fisher's special effects crew, that two jet engines they brought in could get up to 100 mile per hour winds. It was kind of crazy, and the actors were up for everything. There's a scene where around the rodeo motel sequence in the movie where Glen Powell's character actually gets dragged around a swimming pool a little bit as the wind sucks him towards a tornado, and he has to claw his way back. And it was freezing cold late at night. We had to shoot this in December after the actors' strike, and he kind of was happily letting us harness him up and drag him around. So they were all great.
seems like it was in a very intense time, lots of practicality. But of course, you can't necessarily have Twisters uh, practically on set. So tell me a little bit about the preparation in creating these weather patterns. I did hear that you guys were kind of obsessed with learning so much about real life weather events and
Yeah.
putting that into practice.
Yeah, no, we were. And it really started with Lee Isaac Chung, our director. He really wanted to have that real. He'd grown up in Arkansas. So in Tornado Alley himself, he was familiar with what it was like. He really wanted to bring that feeling to the audience. And so he had some initial references. I mean, one of the blessings and the curses of now versus when we did the original film 28 years ago was that we have a lot more reference now, so we can look on YouTube, and there's storm chasers out there. And so we had all that material to draw on, and Isaac chose for each tornado some key images, and we identified some clips for each tornado. But we also had a storm chaser team that we sent out to actually film real weather. We got it. They did film a couple of tornadoes, nothing that we were able to use in the film, but they shot all these amazing supercells, the giant cloud formations that appear on top of the tornadoes. And we were able to use some of that footage, and we were able to also study it because these are guys who have, armored vehicles, and they drive into the storms. And so we got footage, high resolution, of what it was really like in there with all of the hail and the rain and the wind. And we were able to match that, both with what our special effects team did on set and then what our digital team did back on the computers.
Now, with movies like this, the graphics, the special effects are always ever evolving. Was there anything in particular, any type of file or graphic that was created specifically for this film that now will be able to be used in the future?
Yeah, we actually developed a tool set, which we call LFL Pyro, that had been developed at Lucasfilm at ILM over the years, Industrial Light and Magic. And It's something that really came to the front in this particular film, and it gave us a great set of tools that allowed our artists to very quickly experiment with the tornadoes and look at the tornadoes. It's a little bit of an alchemy, you know, you sort of don't exactly know what you'll get. So it's very important you can run a simulation very quickly and see that. So they were able to do that. And that meant that with all of this great reference where we said, here is the target, guys, here's what we want you to match, being able to then run different versions of the tornadoes really quickly allowed them to try and get to that look much more quickly. And on top of that, it allowed for a lot more complexity than we were able to do on the original Twister. And so we have a lot more precision, and the tornadoes look there's a lot more detail in them. They look a lot bigger and more real than we've been able to do before that. We also came up with some newer ways of lighting the tornadoes, so new shading techniques that really allowed us to make something that, you know, if you're in the weather and you're seeing through layers of rain and hail and everything else, then you've got the front of the tornado and you've got all the clouds, and there's all these different layers, and you can see through all these different layers. So it's not like putting a dinosaur in or a spaceship into a scene. There's all these different layers that we have to give, and if they're not there, the audience won't feel like they're really looking at the storm. So these tools gave us the ability to add all that detail and precision in ways that we haven't been able to before Twisters.
Now, speaking of that, I like how you brought up the audience, because there's almost this like there's an uncanny valley really of realism when it comes to special effects, where sometimes the special effects they're just bad for the sake of
Yeah, well,
time, or
they may not have had enough time or money or whatever.
yeah, a lot of times that's what it is, and that people
Yeah.
don't understand that it's like, no, if you give these artists enough time,
Yeah.
they will give you something spectacular, but sometimes it
That's
doesn't
so
work.
true at every stage of the filmmaking process. On set, you know, the great thing was that we had Scott Fisher, who's got a great team of special effects guys. We didn't have a long schedule though. So in the end, you kind of have to really fight the battles. And Scott and I sort of agreed, let's try and get 60 feet of weather. But honestly, schedule-wise, sometimes we weren't even able to get that. But the great thing about being able to get that in some of the shots is that it then gives us something that we can pin our digital versions to. So we're matching what Scott does. We're matching what's real as well. And we're able to blend those two together to make it much more realistic. But it's really important to get, like, if we have more of the time of the special effects guys, then it's going to save us shots, digital shots later on. And often it's going to look better because the actors are going to be in the rain for real. They're getting pelted. So luckily we were able to do a lot of that on this movie.
So I'm assuming you had a really good VFX supervisor on set to be able to give you the reference you needed. I mean, if you got jet engines going,
I was on set. So.
I'm sorry. Yes.
Yes. Yeah, no, we definitely have a great visual effects on-set crew, and you know, people out recording all the camera information, all of the doing lighting references and stuff. And that's really important as well, because on this film we've got so much depth. Where the vehicle is or the actors are, the ground around them might be being pelted with hail, or it might have wind, or we might be blowing the grass. You know, you wouldn't really think about this, but we shoot a plate out in an actual landscape with the vehicles or the actors in it. And we then have to add a tornado, and tornado winds there. So we end up replacing a lot of that. We take the trees and replace them with blowing crazily CG trees. And even though Scott's crew had all of this great firepower out there, like the jet engines, they weren't necessarily able to take a whole half mile of trees and get them to blow. So we have to recreate that in the computer. And then we add a lot of the little really subtle artifacts, if you look closely in the movie, that you can see, and having the opportunity to see it at home, you'll be able to maybe look at it more closely. You'll see these little eddies of dust and stuff that go along the ground, and a lot of detail that is really there if you study this tornado footage closely, but you don't always sort of see that in the way we bring tornadoes to the screen. So it helps make it feel more real, and it's more immersive, I think, for the audience watching.
Now, a speck of dust or things like that, like you're talking about, how important, how vital are those things in order to keep the audience invested in what they're seeing on screen?
I think they're really important. That attention to detail is really important, because it's not so much that they may not know what's wrong with what they're looking at, but they know something's wrong with what they're looking at. And so they may not be able to put their finger on, oh gosh, this was weird because I feel like I should be seeing dust blowing along the road. You've got a truck backing up from a tornado that's, traveling, creating winds of hundreds of miles an hour, but everything's still around the vehicle backing on the road. So luckily, this project gave us the chance to put all of that attention to detail into the shots. And I think that the audience then latches on and says, wow, I really am involved in this story. It feels more real than other things I've seen. And I'm able to get swept up and really have a fun ride with the movie.
Yeah, because I mean, just the insanity of a tornado happening. You have rain effects that you need. You have wind effects. You have ground effects. I mean, like there's just so much coming at you. Does the chaos sometimes help a little bit when it comes to creating these sets, because you're not
It
going to
does a
necessarily
little
be
bit.
thinking?
Yeah, I think the chaos does help. And then, we shot this on film. So we were able to, luckily enough, to shoot on film on this. And I think it really lends itself to the sort of work we're doing. There's all the grain, there's the different, looks that you get, the way film flares, the way film records light. And that's sort of something, of course, we got really good at and over the years, and it sort of helps set our work into the landscape a lot better. I think having those sort of tools and then reproducing the artifacts of film. Of course, the movie also has footage that we didn't necessarily realize when we were shooting it, but the characters are shooting things with iPhones and they're shooting them with GoPros because that's what real storm chasers do. And when we started seeing some of this footage, because the props guy was like, "Oh, do you want to turn on the camera when we're shooting?" They're like, "Yeah, let's turn on the camera. We'll check with the actors they're okay with it." So we just had these cameras rolling all the time as they were going down the street. And then the editor and the director saw some of this and they're like, "Well, these guys are really storm chasers. We want to be able to cut to this footage." And so they started using all this GoPro footage, which we didn't really expect, actually. And then, you've got we were dealing in the end with shots that, vehicle shots that we might have shot on a process stage or whatever. And we have a blue screen behind the film shots, but then we use some GoPro footage and you can see the director of photography and the AD and myself standing back there conferring about a shot in the background. We had to paint all that out and put in the road behind them. It was like, oh, okay.
What would you say was the most challenging shot that you guys had to work on?
I think the most challenging shot, and it's a shot I'm very proud of, is the shot of towards the beginning and the end of the film, they are chasing a smaller tornado. It goes into a big rain cloud, and then they go into the rain cloud after it, and they end up losing GPS, losing tracking. They don't know where they are, and they find themselves outside this massive industrial facility. And so a lot of stuff happens there. In the end, a tornado actually forms during part of the scene because of all of the chemicals and all of the heat that gets set off by the tornado. And then our characters end up fleeing from that, just barely making it out. And behind them, you see the whole refinery erupt, and the tornado, where the tornado was, you see an EF5 emerge behind them out of the mist. And it's a really challenging shot. We had the vehicles and we had a country road, but that was it. We weren't really allowed to film near real refineries. And actually real refineries, they like to say we are tornado proof in Oklahoma, the refineries there. So, but they don't like us sort of suggesting anything other than that. But, for dramatic effect, we kind of needed to blow something up. So, so we started with just an empty field and we built a refinery in the computer, and then we blew it up. And then we had a little bit of, Scott helped us out with some, practical explosions and effects to light up the vehicles and the actors and stuff. So that was really helpful. But a lot of that last shot where they're fleeing down the road, we just had the vehicles on the road and we're adding everything else. And it's a pretty spectacular shot. I think it's in some of the trailers. So.
Yeah, it's a great shot. I love, it's really, really tense and really, really exciting, but very action packed weather wise. Ben, thank you so much for your time. It's always such a pleasure to be able to chat with the people behind the scenes, especially VFX artists, because man, what a job you guys have. Because it's so vital that you get so much of your job right in order to keep audiences invested in the film. And by the looks of the numbers, by the looks of the position, even this past weekend, you guys did a fantastic job.
No, I know. I think it's going to keep going and legging out. Maybe we'll see it come back to 4DX screens. I don't know.
Hopefully, that'd be a really good thing.
That'd be fun. That'd be fun.
It was great to meet you, and I hope to
You
chat
too.
with you again.
You too, man.